who you are, and tell me about why you taking the SAT. Tell me about your special attributes. For example, you can focus very well, or you can learn English or learn anything very well. Tell me about them.
My name is Lee. You can call me Lina, which is my English name. I decided to study SAT because I want to study abroad in Canada, and I find that SAT is beneficial for me when I apply for scholarship.
And your special attribute is, what's your special?
Well, I can concentrate on the class, and I can study by myself, and oh, to be active for the class.
Okay, I understand what you mean. So here's the thing about our class is that we are going to have to be collaborative. So the fact that you are willing to be active in the class is very plausible. So as a reminder, you can always turn on the caption down in the bar below. You can see there's one option called show caption. So if you can't follow my voice or can't understand my English accent, you can always turn that on, and so that you can be that would be easier. Okay, so our class is still one student short, but let's get started. Today we're going to learn about apostrophe and periods and semicolons. But first of all, I want you to understand the right way to learn English vocabulary, because it has been one of the topics, if not the topic, for international students and even American students, because on the SAT, you don't really know every single thing on it. You don't really understand every single word on it. So how are you going to be able to, first of all, understand the context? Do you know the context? The context basically is how we going to say everything around context. Context. This is context. So on the SAT, you don't really need to understand everything based on vocabulary. On the lexical side, which is vocabulary side, you need to understand the context. What is context? On the book of Erica Meltzer, she is a professional writer on the SAT subject. She defines it as con is the Latin for nearby, near or nearby. And text is just strings of words. Strings of words. So context, in summary, it is the words that's nearby. Okay, so that is the meaning of context. By doing so, what am I doing? What was I doing? I was splitting up the text into subcategories. I split it context into con and text. You see what I did? That's how you're going to learn English vocabulary. All right. So it might be new, it might be different, but it's maybe even for Americans whom I've taught before, they don't really know what this actually is, but in a subconscious level, they actually understood it from the beginning. And that is how native English speakers, they learn English. They don't learn because they don't have another language to be the reference. They can't translate from A to B, from language A to language B. They only had one thing, that is the context, and they had to do what they had to do. They had to split up the words. So the next time, anytime these roots appear, they will automatically or subconsciously understand it without even having to translate it first. So long story short, here is the right way to learn English vocab. I've sent a file on Google Classroom. Let me open it real quick. So hang on a sec, I will open up my Google Classroom. And the Google Classroom, for those who haven't learned with me before, it is a platform on which we can share specifically I can share the homework and materials for the class. So here is, wait. Okay. Here is the Google Classroom. So here I've sent a new SAT 1000 vocab file here, and on this file you see what I've just explained. Because look, for example, there's this one, abduction or abdicate. You can see that they have splitted these words into subcategories. Ab means away, dict is speak, aid is to be, to make. For example, like that, you can basically learn these are called the roots, and these are not English roots, they are Latin roots, because English language, basically they originated from Latin. So everything is just cherry picking every other words and then combine them together and makes up a word. That is how English is formed. And I want you to focus on that facet of language learning. It's not only learning to speak two languages or to speak one language and the other. You need to understand how the language is constructed, because each and every word, you don't really need to remember. I don't want you to memorize. I want you to understand the root, the meaning of everything. Okay. That's how you're going to be able to follow up with the class on the, on the grammar section also, because basically, let me open up the board again. Okay, because basically, that is how we're going to learn and approach English. It's just like maths, but the only difference is it's maths with more words in it, more ABC in it, and it's no different. 1 + 1 is 2, so con plus text is context, so it means nearby text. It's basically the same, and I want you to approach English in that way, and in this sense, you can basically learn anything. So first of all, I want to make clear some way we can approach this first. For example, in this mortuary, mort is, if you learn French, you would know mort is basically death, dead or death. This is in French and English. If you really know French, you'd know that they are very similar because they take the same root from Latin. They share the same history and they share the same root. That's why they have so many similar words. And you have mort is dead. So mortuary means a place. So mortuary is a place for the dead. Okay. So mortified. So to say that you are something ified, meaning that you are being affected by something with this adjective. So, for example, you are ified by mort. Mort is you're scared to death. All right. That's how you're going to interpret the mortify word. And sanctuary, for example, next example, sanctuary means that you can is sanction or anything sancrative or sanctious. They are in a religious way, religious, sacred. They're very sacred. Or honorary. Okay, they are very rare, very sacred, very honorary. That means saint. Sanctuary is the same thing. Is the place which is sacred, which is honorary. The place sanctuary is that place for religion, okay, because it's sacred. So you can basically understand English in this way. So sanctimonious is the same thing, but it's in adjective. Adjectives meaning something is very religious. Someone is very religious, follow and obey religiously, okay? And next one is biodegradable. You can understand where this is coming from. Biodegradable means that a plastic bag is not biodegradable. a plastic pen is not biodegradable, but if you say some object is biodegradable, it means that it can be dissolved organically. What does that mean? Bio means life. Degradable means disappear or just gone. Okay, biodegradable, it can be organically dissolved. And biofuel, the same thing. Biofuel is the thing that runs every engine, right? And bio means that something is originated from life. So biofuel is not artificial, it's from nature. For example, tree leaves and everything like that, they can turn into biofuel because it originated from life or from nature. And that's how I want you to approach English vocabulary for American or English or anyone who speak English natively or reached the native level. They have this in mind. They've already had this in mind, and for the most part, they can understand most words because they've learned they've seen and encountered enough words to be able to form their own dictionary of these roots. So they can just see a new word and they think, that sounds like something. For example, I've never seen mortuary before, but for some reason I still understood mortuary is something related to death. That's because I've read or I've seen enough words to be able to guess the meaning. That's how the guessing meaning works, especially for those who are learning in this class. Sometimes I use many C2, C1 words. So take note on that. And if there's any words that you don't understand, you can always ask me or just take note, and you might encounter them later on the SAT, because I am a proficient user of English. So you can learn that from me. And so that is basically what I want you to take in mind, and I want you to note that deeply so that you can follow this through and through the course. Okay. So, and as for the next topic, I want you to look at this word, apostrophe. And I want you to tell me what that means. Do you know what apostrophe means? Okay, I'm going to ask Lee, pardon me, but did you say your English name was Emily?
No, my English name is Lina.
Lina. Okay, I'll call you Lina from now on for easier to pronounce. Can you tell me how do you know what apostrophe is? Do you know it?
Sorry, I don't know.
Okay, that's all right. Who knows what apostrophe is? Can you give me the answer?
Does it show possession like of a word?
Okay. Can you come up with another use of it? Do you know any other use of it?
No.
All right. The first one is correct. The apostrophe is basically this symbol. For example, her, no, he, apostrophe S. This is the apostrophe. Okay. So based on what Anne said, the apostrophe shows ownership, shows the relationship of owner and object. So if I say John's book, that means the book is from John. Okay, but there is still another use for this, which is to concatenate to be verbs. Okay, John apostrophe S can also mean John is, or when it goes with by I am, okay, you are, or they are. See, it's very, everyone knows this, but I want you to take this in mind, to have this in mind so that you will certainly know what to do. So that, because the questions like it are very, very simple. You can do it with 90 to 98% of certainty, but I want you to make it 100% so that you will never, ever make this kind of question wrong ever again. Okay, so this is very simple aspect of punctuations. So this is apostrophe. It has two main uses. Firstly is to show the ownership, and secondly is to concatenate or shorten to be verbs. Speaking of which, I am going to have to show you what to expect for the SAT writing course, because let me see, because here's the thing. I want you to finish every single thing related to new knowledge in the first 2 weeks, and then we can practice and practice and practice in the later part of the course. Because I know this class is extremely gifted already in terms of English, but we are going to have to boost it up so that we can focus on other things and fixing rather than just learning new things. All right, I'm going to open a file of mine here right now, and this is what we are going to study. This is my just table of content of what we are going to expect. Here, first of all, we have two parts in English grammar. We have punctuation, and secondly, we have grammar rules. And punctuation, it's very simple. It only has some basic and fundamental punctuations, for example, apostrophe, commas, semicolons, periods, colons, dashes. And the one single thing I want you to focus on is the commas. This is the most difficult punctuation of all. And the rest, they only have like 1 or 2 use cases or 1 or 2 special cases. They're very simple. But the difficult part comes to grammar rules, which are the conventional rules that the SAT or English users, sometimes only the SAT agrees to be correct. For example, wordiness, sneak peek, if you find an option that sounds ridiculously long and unnecessarily phrased, it's wrong because it's in this error. It's within this error, wordiness. And next is parallel structure, subject verb agreement, pronoun agreement, verb tense, who, word pairs, who, which, whom, modifications, idiom, diction, transitions. And they're basically it's. Okay, so it's just a summary of everything that you're going to this file is just a summary of everything you're going to study, but I'm going to have to walk through everything first, and then you can continue from then. All right, now back to our whiteboard. Okay, back to our whiteboard. So this is just a very simple use case or punctuation. So I'm just going to walk it. If I'm going too fast, please tell me, because I would assume that you already know this, but I'm just going to consolidate your knowledge. Okay. Next is how are you going to be sure 100% of the time whether or not they're using S for concatenating to be verbs or to indicate ownership? So you're just going to have to assume everything is to be verbs, and then if it is, it makes sense. You're going to say that, well, this is concatenating to be verbs, and if it's not, then it's the other, and vice versa. For example, this time you can tell John is books. So this doesn't make sense at all. So this is incorrect. So it's within the ownership, the use of ownership. And there are some notes. Notes, for example, For pronouns, here, do you know what pronouns are? Any of you guys? Can you tell me some examples of pronouns?
He, him, they, them, he, she.
All right. It's, for example, he, they, she, um, they are basically it. And pronouns are just way for you to say to point to a subject without saying its name or its where it is. You just point to a subject. Okay. For example, he is a male object, and they is just a plural object. She is a female object. So, but him, them, uh, him, her. These aren't pronouns. These are objects. Okay. What are objects and what are pronouns? Pronouns basically it's a subject. An object is basically a subject, but it's a secondary subject. Okay. For example, you have he is better than her. Okay. So he is better than her. So it's her is the secondary subject. So it is an object. And he is a subject because it's the first subject. Basically, that's how you understand this is a structure of a sentence, of a clause. All right. So we're going to head back to clause later on, because clauses are just a different field, and it's very, very important, but very simple. So I'm going to have to have a separate note on that. So please take note on anything that you are seeing on the board right now, and we're going to head over to one single very, very most important aspect of apostrophe in this. Okay, so I'm going to give you like 20-30 seconds for you to look through, and if you don't have any more question, I will go on and finish the apostrophe. Please do take notes, because you can't be able, I can assure you that you can't remember everything, even the most simplest thing. Okay. Even if everything is simple, you can't possibly remember everything without making an error. So okay, so I'm having this meeting recorded. So if you haven't understood any part, you can always go back to the video later on and just have a review. Okay. And the very important part that the SAT are going to trick on you is that this Harry, do you know Harry and Meghan, the royal family? Harry and Meghan. Many people don't like them, so I'm going to put them in this example. Meghan. Okay. They are very, if you don't know, they're very famous individuals, and they are husband and wife. And for a husband and wife to actually be husband and wife, they're going to have a house. But unfortunately, let's see, last February, I believe, Queen Elizabeth, Prince Harry's mom, grandmother died, so he was forced to move out and attend the funeral. So he stayed in a different house of his. So it's Harry's and Meghan's house. Can you tell me the difference between these two? Based on the examples I've given. Okay, Hung, you've raised your hand. Let's see what you've got.
One refers to the house which belongs to both of them. And the second sentence refers to the individual houses. Is
All
that
right, that is correct. And in fact, the first scenario is when I'm referring to Harry and Meghan. And Meghan, they both share a house. This is the first case. And if Harry is to move out to another house, these two houses are individuals from are just separated from each other. So they are two houses. So how in English are you going to say that Harry and Meghan's houses? So here's a way. You're going to say that Harry and Meghan's house to say that they share the same house, and Harry's and Meghan's house. I've made a mistake right here. You're going to assume that these are plural because if they have two houses, it's going to be houses, right? There's no way they use different houses and it's a singular. There's no way. So almost every time it is in this case, Harry's and Meghan's or subjects ones and subjects twos, objects. They're almost going to be always plural because they're separated from each other. And that's basically it. Let me see if there's more notes on this. Because apostrophe, there's just one page. The knowledge you have to remember that it's just one page. Oh, all right. Who? I want you to touch on this a bit. This subject. Who? Whom? No, that's for later. That's for later time. Let me see. Let me erase this. Who and that. If who, no, let's talk about who first. If I am going to say that whose object, I am going to refer to whose. See, it's just a transformation because who in itself is actually a pronoun. Okay, so almost every pronoun that is not a name can always change its shape when it comes to the apostrophe. Okay, for example, this he, if it becomes his, if he's become his book, for example, they become their, and she becomes her. It's basically what I would think that you have known this already, but I'm just going to note this down for you. All right, let's see. And I just written that. That basically means who, right? That in a structure we call a relative clause. What is relative clause? It's just two clauses or one clause. It shows relation, but we're not going to dive too deep on that yet, but let's see. If I basically, this is an instance of relative clause, I am going to say that he who made this painting. It sounds very archaic, right? Because this structure is very old. He who made this painting, this work, this work. For example, this is just an ancient use of English. Most people they don't really use he who made this work anymore. Mostly they don't really put this, because if you are to put he who, it sounds very like 19 or 80s, 1800s, yes, 1800s poems and literature. It sounds pretty much like that if you use this, but in SAT, there's something called literature, poems and passages, and history, poems and passages, or paragraphs if you are taking the SAT, digital SAT. So this is an ancient or just a dated structure. He who made this work. Who here is just a pronoun. It's from relative clause, who made this work. This clause is supporting this subject. And this is why it's showing, it's who is helping to show the relation between these two clauses. Is brilliant. Okay. So this clause right here, it shows relation between this inner clause and the outer clause. That's why this means relative clause. Okay. So if you are to put that, it's totally fine. But if you are in Britain, you're in England, you can't really use this. They're quite strict on using who in certain things. But in one case, one specific and only case, remember to note down anything I say that only or every time or always. See those certainty words, those words of certainty, it's because they are special cases. So there's one special case that is always to be used with that. When who is to replace humans, right? But once you want to replace human and object, you're going to use that. John and his elephant. Elephant. That left last year. Came back. See, in this case, I used John and elephant as a subject. It is a phrase of subject. So that replaces both John and elephant because they both left last year. But if I use which, it will become this elephant. And if I use who, it will becomes John, right? So if I want to say that both John and his elephant left last year, I'm going to have to say that. So this is one specific or very special case in which you're going to have to use that, despite the usage of who and which, because in this case, you can always use who and which, but if you want to replace both a human and an object or an animal, you're going to have to stick with that. Okay, so there's nothing else. It's very simple. Apostrophe, just a simple aspect in the SAT. If you don't have any more question, which I assume you won't, because I'm going to move on to the next aspect of the SAT, which is semicolons and periods. If you have any question, please do tell me. I'm waiting. All right, semicolons and periods. In this, why am I categorize them? Why am I teaching them at the same time? You would assume that they share the same usage, right? Do you know the semicolon? This is the semicolon, and this is a period, or a dot, or period, whatever you use. Why am I teaching them in the same time? Because they are basically the same. Okay. In however way you understand semicolon and periods, in a context that's different from the SAT. From within the SAT, you must always assume, this is to always assume semicolons and periods are the same thing. Why is that? Because semicolon, it uses to separate two complete clauses. Complete, I'm going to highlight. How can I use a different ink? Oh, here. Right. Complete. I'm going to use black again. Clauses. Oh God, I forgot this. Okay, complete clauses. Why am I highlighting this? Because Semicolons and periods are used to separate complete clauses in contrast to commas, which we will learn later on because this is very difficult. Commas, they are only used to separate incomplete clauses, which are dependent clauses. Okay, for complete clauses, who can tell me what are two complete clauses? Clause 1 and clause 2. They are considered complete. In which case? Can you tell me? Why are they called complete or independent clauses? Complete or independent clauses. All right, I'm going to say, if you don't know what that is, I'm going to explain it. Clause 1 and clause 2 are going to be considered independent or complete from each other because they do not relate. Okay, they don't need relative clauses. Where is it? Gosh, here. They don't need relative clauses because they are complete from each other. They complete a single sentence, they complete a single clause, and they complete a single idea. They don't need a relative or another clause to support its idea for it to make sense. Do you get it? So if you are to separate who make this work, can you understand what it is? You don't really know who make this work, right? It doesn't make sense. Or make this work. It doesn't make sense. But you need he who make this work is brilliant because this clause is incomplete. So this is dependent to each other. Okay. So this is going to be separated by two commas, and this is a very special use case, which we will go back to it later. Basically, this is dependent. The inner clause is dependent to the outer clause, but the outer clause is not really fully dependent on the inner clause. So this is the what we are going to encounter later on the comma section. But for now, we're going to say that independent clauses, they are two separate clauses. And one clause in English, you are considered a clause if you have these requirements. You have a subject, you have a verb. So you are a clause. Okay. If you only have a subject, only have a noun, and you don't have a verb, you aren't a clause. You are just an independent, oh no, you are just a dependent clause. Okay. So when two clauses are independent from each other, they represent a single clause. For example, on the SAT, you don't really care about its meaning when it comes to punctuation. You only care about its form because it is categorized within the form and structure section of the SAT. So you must only care about the form. Here you see that she works. He studies. We dance. You see, these are quite correct, but they don't sound really good and they don't really relate to each other, or do they, right? On the SAT, we don't really care about that. We should only care about whether or not it is correct, whether or not it is correctly used. And in this case, it is not, because this is creating a run-on. Why is this a run-on? Because this is a subject, this is a verb, so this is a clause. And by saying this is a clause, what punctuation should we use? Either a semicolon or a period. Either both of this, right? Sorry. Oops. What? All right. Or a period. So this is also a subject, and this is also a verb. This subject, this is verb. This creates run-on. if you used commas. You see, this is a very important part in punctuation. Remember, run on. This is what you're going to encounter time and time again. And what the ICT, in whatever way, they will fool you again and again. Notwithstanding the fact that you understood what run-on is and you understand clearly what and when run-on happens, the ICT will try and find different ways for them to try to fool you into making this mistake of run-on. Because this is undoubtedly one of the most repeated errors on the SAT. So they're just going to strike on that. And if you are to not make a mistake on run-ons, you're going to be able to score pretty high on the SAT. So the SAT is just formulaic. If you are to understand these, you are going to be good. If you don't, and you don't remember the formulas, you're not going to score well. All right. So this just used between two complete sentences, and there's a different case. There's a different usage for this. If you've finished copying whatever I was writing right now, I'm going to swipe to a different section of the board. Okay, so this is a second usage for semicolons and periods. They are to be used to connect conjunctive adverbs. You're going to see two things from connecting, from relating two sentences to each other or two clauses to each other. Either it's a fun boy. Remember this? Fun boys adverbs. No, not conjunctive adverbs, but something I really forgot what it says. What does fanboys mean? No, basically it's just for to use. It stands for. I'll try to look it up later, but for and nor, but, or, yet, and so. These conjunctions. They are called conjunctions. Okay, pardon me. They are conjunction. These are conjunctions, and they are used to connect to independent clauses, dependent clauses. You have to figure out what is dependent and what is independent. And for conjunctive adverbs, conjunctive adverbs, they are, for example, however. For example, and well, what else? There are countless other. There are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 conjunctions, but there are countless conjunctive adverbs. Because conjunctive adverbs, they are just made up words for people to connect two sentences. And for conjunctions, they are a set of 7 words to connect two dependent clauses, so that they won't create something called run-on, which we have encountered before. Run-on happens when, and only when, run-on happens when two independent clauses are connected via a comma. Or this is a comma, without the use of conjunctions. I almost forgot what conjunctions are. Okay, conjunctions. And when it comes to conjunctions, do you remember immediately one phrase, one word? Fan boys, 7 words. Fan boys. It's a shorthand version for and no, but, or, yet, so. You're going to have these memorized because to differentiate between conjunctions and conjunctive adverbs, you just need to learn the conjunctions, and the adverbs and the linking words that are not conjunctions, they are all conjunctive adverbs if they don't fall in this 7 words. All right, so I'm going to give out some more. In contrast, notwithstanding, they're countless. By the same token, which I will compile a list and then I'm going to give you later. Same token. See, they're all conjunctive adverbs, and they are very easy to be mistaken for conjunctions if you can't remember what fanboys are. All right, let's see. Oh, I think we almost finished the entire chapter of punctuation. So there are only 2 sections left, 3 sections left, to be honest. In fact, it's colons and dashes and commas. Commas, undoubtedly, you're going to need a different session for this because commas is very difficult. But I think I'm going to teach colons and dashes because we have learned so quickly. All right. If you don't have any other questions, I will go to colons and dashes if you want. Okay. Please pause me if you don't understand. This is very important. All right. Punctuation on the SAT, you can't make it wrong because this will make up for the parts, for the reading parts, the difficult reading parts, which you might be wrong at. But on the punctuation, you can always almost certainly get every question right. So please be sure to understand everything 100%, because on the testing environment, it will be some pressures and it will drop down to 90%. That would be perfect. But if you are to prepare from 90%, you're going to drop down to 70 to 80, 70, 60. It's not ideal. Okay. So what you're going to have to do is to learn everything in preparation for the exam so that nothing is new. All right. So if there's any additional knowledge, I will remind you later when we fix or review on the official SAT practice. But for now, I'm going to continue on colons. I'm planning to have you review a bit, but I think it's quite easy. If you want to review, please say. But I think there hasn't been anything that troubles you yet, because apostrophe, semicolons, period, and colons and dashes, they basically very similar to each other, and they're very easy to understand. So I'm going to teach you colons. Colons.
Sorry, may I go grab some water, please?
All right.
2 minutes.
Please.
Thank
Okay,
you.
please do. So I'm going to write something out first while we wait for Hung to grab his water. Colons. First is outro. I'm going to write an example. To London. One outro to London.
Sorry, I'm back.
All right. Hydration. Keep yourself hydrated. Dehydrated. No, keep yourself hydrated. That's the most important part in studying. In fact, when I advise my students to take the SAT, I always advise them to drink loads of water. Why is that, you may ask? Because in fact, our brain is 70%, or our human body, it mostly consists of water, especially our brain is 70 to 80% of water, made of water. So in order for it to function correctly, it has to have sufficient fuel, right? Fuel in which water, in this case, water. So you're going to have to drink a lot of water for you to understand the lesson fully, for you to work fully, for you to take the test 100% fully. Okay, so that's why it's almost like a ritual for myself. I always take a bottle of water with me in every single exam, whether it's semester exam, final exam, or national entrance exam, anything like that, always, or the SAT, of course, I always take a sip of water, just a small sip, or just to keep myself awake, because in fact, if you are sleepy, you just need to drink a sip of water, and then you'll become a bit more energetic, way more healthy than using caffeine, right? So it's almost like a ritual for myself. I always just drink a sip of water before any exam. The SAT itself, I did drink a lot of water before. That's why I believe I got such a high score. You should practice it sometimes, and you see the difference. When you feel sleepy or when you feel tired or anything at all, just drink water, and it will keep you dehydrated and it will keep you motivated. All right. So back to our lesson. Let's see. Speaking of tiredness, have you gotten used to waking up this early, Anne?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's a great thing, because the SAT is going to be very early. So at this time, I believe is 8 a.m., right? 8 a.m. in the US. So the SAT is going to take place at 8. So precisely this time. You're going to have to wake up a bit earlier than usual. Collins, we visited these tourists. Museum, places, and monument. This is an example of Collins, and it's a very tourist attraction. Why am I writing so badly today? Okay, I think it's legible. If you can't read my text, please excuse me. On our trip to London, we visited these tourist attractions: museum, place, palaces, God's sake. Palaces. Okay, palaces and monuments. Okay, so what is the purpose of Collins right here, right now?
To make a
Do you know?
list.
All right, correct. It is to initiate a list. So you can't say tourist attraction without the Collins. Without this, you'll create something called not a sentence. It's just not a sentence. You can't say tourist attraction, museum, palaces, and monuments. You're going to have to separate the list from the actual structure of a sentence itself, because the list is a different part other than the sentence or the clause. You're going to have to separate it with either a dash, a comma, or a colon. On the other hand, the colons can be used to explain. Its explanatory usage is for rare cases only. And there's one requirement for the colons. Okay. Collins is very easygoing. Anyone can be its buddy, all right? Either it's a clause, a dependent clause, or independent clause. Anyone can be its buddy, but there's just one requirement. If you are dependent clause, you're going to have to stay behind the colons. And if you're independent clause, you're going to be permitted to be in front of colons. All right. S plus V, which is an independent clause. And for example, you can place anything after a colon, for just one word only, foot. This is correct because colons is very easygoing. Its only requirement is you're going to have a complete sentence or an independent clause before it, or else it's not going to allow you to be there, to have it there. Okay, so this is the only requirement of having a colon, is to have an independent clause before. That's it. That's basically it. And what else? Dashes it's very interesting, but we're going to have to step into it a bit. Dashes are basically like commas, but it only has two usage of commas. It can initiate a list, a list. All right. It can initiate a dependent clause. Dash, this is a dash, and this is the dash, and it is simplified by an M dash. This is called an M dash, and this is just a dash. A dash is when you connect two words, two words, for example, foot tracking. This is a dash, and this is an M dash. When we talk about dashes, we talk about M dashes, and when we talk about this dash, we don't really talk about it, so we don't just shorten M dash into dashes, although it's not correct, but it's what it is. So when we talk about M dashes or dashes in the SAT, you're going to assume that it's interchangeable with commas. And commas, yes, we haven't learned it, but we can know that dashes has only two uses of commas, which is to initiate a list or to explain, or else to explain a thought. Okay, explain a thought, and or to initiate a depending clause. For example, you can replace the where is it? You can replace the comma here. Let me you can replace the comma here with a dash. It's totally fine. An M dash, it's totally fine because it's within its use. So you can totally do it. Right? And these two punctuations, there's a requirement, is they have to be at the end of a sentence. This colons, it has to be at the end of sentence. It has to be the final it basically functions like a more outgoing period. It basically is that it's to finish a sentence, but it can open up another sentence that is not that doesn't have to be a finished clause. So it can have anything after it, but it has to have a complete sentence before it. It is the colon. But when you talk about the M dashes or the dashes, you're going to have to approach it in a different way, because the only time you're going to have to place it at the end of a sentence is when it is to explain a thought. See, this thought is at the end of a sentence. I will give you another example. She walks vehemently. See, this is when you can use M dashes to initiate a thought, to explain a thought, is what at the end of a sentence. You can't really initiate a thought or start a thought in middle or in the beginning, at the beginning. So, or a different example, you can say, what's it? They hated him. A coward. See, this is a use when you can initiate a thought, and it is at the end of sentence. You're just gonna have to remember it because it is rarely tested on the SAT, but it does appear on the SAT, and I want you to grasp all the knowledge there are on because College Board or the test givers, they are very unpredictable, and you're gonna have to be prepared to get cautious or to get prepared for everything. Okay. So the next part is I'm going to have you practiced on something. If you don't have anything more, I'm going to give you a bit some time to completely take notes on everything we've learned today. I'm going to open up some practice. Well, it's going well, right? If you have any question, please raise them now. And if you don't, you can always message me later. But it's recommended to have a face-to-face interaction. All right, I have taught you something, and then this is your turn to do it. Let me share this. So this is, wait, hang on a bit. Have you finished? I'm going to change the whiteboard. Okay. Right, this is the official SAT from 2021, compiled by me. And I'm going to have you do some very simple, very basic questions. Firstly, from May 8th, 2021, US. Let me see. I'm going to select every pages and right. Wait, are they sorted? Why is it so messy? 1, 2. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What's going on? 6, 7, 8. Oh, okay. It's just a bit messy, just a little bit from the 6th and the 7th question. But hey, from this, you can do it. Firstly, I'm going to want you to do the, where is it? The second question. Lee, can you do it for me? The second question. Take your time and let's see how you do it. Can you do the second question? Everyone, where are you going? I see your cursor all around the places. You can just look at the second page, the third page. There's the second question here. See how it goes, how you do it. Okay, have you come up with your answer, Lee? Lena?
Sorry.
What do you think? Anh and Hưng, you can privately message me if you come up with your own answer already. Every time I ask a student to come up with their own question, you guys can give your own answers in the chat.
I choose A.
All right. A, let's see. A is semicolon, is the semicolon. Yes, I'm highlighting the page. This is a semicolon.
Oh,
Wait. A is a semicolon.
no, B.
All right. B, how about you, Anne? Have you come up with your answer?
What page are you on? Because I see like a bunch of page 2s. It
What?
just shows like page 2.
Oh, that is not page 2. It's the section 2. The page is there's one page I'm highlighting. It's down below. Yes, yeah, that one. The third page. Yeah, that one. You see?
This one.
Yes, that one. All right. What's your choice?
B with the colon.
Okay, so this is just a very classic example of how a punctuation is very simple. So when you do it, you're most certainly going to have to be correct on it because there are only a handful of punctuation questions, but they account for pretty much like 10 questions on it. They account for only like 20%, 30% of the questions, but they account for almost 45% of the points. Because if you are to make a mistake on this section or this question, you're going to be subtracted a lot from your exam. For example, you can make a mistake in vocabulary and context in writing, and you are subtracted, for example, 10 marks. But once you make a mistake in this, you're going to be subtracted 20 or 30, depending on the difficulty of the question for the new digital SAT, right? So this is a quite simple question, but it does take time, doesn't it? So what I'm going to have you do is to memorize everything I've taught you today, and then to basically review it over and over again so that you can just spend maximum 10 seconds on this question. So how am I going to approach this? Daytime pollinators such as bees and butterflies have many well-documented threats. So Dr. Knopf's team sought to investigate a potential threat to nocturnal pollinators, something, artificial light. So it can't possibly be A, because artificial light is not an independent clause. So A is almost certainly is going to be wrong because, yes, C is wrong because nocturnal pollinators, artificial light, it's not a complete sentence. This sentence is dangling and it doesn't make sense. And D, it does make sense. But what makes D wrong? I want you to remember that. On the real SAT, you don't going to have, this is what I'm aiming you for. You're going to question every single question, or whether it's correct, or whether one question answer is wrong, one option is wrong or correct. I want you to question them. Why is it correct or why is it wrong? Every single one, A, B, C, and D, because I want you to be 100% certain, not 90, not 80, not 99%. Only one shadow of a little shadow of a doubt. It can go a long way on the exam. So I want you to be absolutely careful on this. So why is D wrong? Let's see. Daytime pollinators such as bees and butterflies have many well-known documented threats. So Dr. Knopf's team sought to investigate a potential threat to nocturnal pollinators. It is a complete sentence. See, this is a complete sentence, and B is almost certainly is going to be correct, but why is D wrong? So the comma, if you come to the comma to initiate a thought, you're going to have to use the dash. You can't use commas at the end of sentence. All right. If you use comma at the end of sentence, it's very easily mistaken to be the closing comma for a relative clause. For example, we haven't learned it, so it's a bit difficult to explain, but don't worry, we'll get there. For example, this. Wait. We have a clause, right? We have a relative clause. And we have the remaining part of a clause, something else. And this relative clause is bracketed by 2 commas, in which case you can just cross them out because it is unnecessary. You don't need to know it because it's just a subsection of a sentence. You don't really have to understand or read the part within, which is bracketed by the commas, to understand the entire sentence. So you have the right to just cross it out. So it's very similar to the question we've seen before, the question number 2. We can't use comma at the end of sentence because it can be easily mistaken for being the closing comma for the above mentioned sentence. So it can't be used like that. So the only way you can use a comma or anything, a comma to suggest a thought, is at the end of sentence, is when you use it with a dash. So it's the only reason B is the only correct answer. All right. So next up is Hung. I want you to point to this. How can I just highlight it so it looks a bit better? Can I resize it? Oh, I can. Looks pretty low quality, but you can read it still, right? So look at the question 14, Hung, and everybody else. Can you give me the answer? You just need to read this part. You don't have to read the upper part.
I see.
Okay, 14, you chose C. And what about everybody else? Hung chose C. Let me see. There are a number of reasons why job applicants favor some degree of flexibility in workplace attire. Having the option to dress casually can mean greater physical comfort. Also, being able to personalize otherwise identical uniforms with unique flourishes can enhance happiness by allowing the blank to retain a greater sense of personality, identity in the workplace. All right, Hung came up with the answer pretty quickly because this in itself, a pronoun. When you encounter a question, you're going to have to categorize them. Pronoun, right? This is the first step, categorize them. And if you have successfully categorized them, you remember what pronouns are for. They are to replace a noun, they're to replace an object, a subject, but it is the main reason that pronoun appears is to make the sentence easier to understand and make it clearer. So if you read a sentence and replace them with pronouns and you can't understand what it is, you can't make sense of what it is, it's wrong. All right. In this case, I'm saying allowing them to retain a greater sense of personal identity in the workplace. And let's see, what is them referring to? What is them referring to? Also, being able to personalize otherwise identical uniforms in unique flourishes can enhance happiness by allowing them to are them uniforms? Can uniforms be them? It can't be, right? Although uniforms is plural, but uniforms, they don't have personal identity unless you are a walking or a human uniform. I don't know. You can't have a personal identity with a uniform, right? The next one is him or her. Well, him or her is shifted a bit, isn't it? Him or her is a singular, it's not a plural. So I'm going to have to track it. Also, being able to personalize it, there's no him or her on this sentence, on this paragraph. So it can't be correct. Him or her, them, they're wrong. The flourishes, on the other hand, they introduce a different noun. So it's not exactly a pronoun, it's a new one. But it's in the pronoun section of the question. But flourishes, it introduces a different pronoun, a different noun. So it makes sense because you could just plug in anything and let's see, because it doesn't replace or anything, so it makes sense at first. But let's see again, the flourishes, it can't have a great sense of personal identity in the workplace. So it's again wrong. The only option remaining is C. So let's check if C is actually 100% correct. Employees, it hasn't been mentioned before, so therefore you're going to have to put a new noun in this sentence. You can't use he, she, or them because employees is not mentioned, hasn't been mentioned. So see, employees, they have a sense of personal identity because they are humans, and the employee is the only way to the only correct answer. See, them, personal identity. Nope, it can only be employee. It's pretty simple when it boils down to some basic steps. Is first, categorize the question, and secondly, remember what the related knowledge, and thirdly, just execute. And by executing, I mean just do it. Each category has its own execution, right? For example, when you comes in term with transition words, when you see transition questions, you're going to have to look back and look before and after the sentence which is mentioned. And for pronoun, you're going to have to look up to see if the pronoun in question has already been mentioned. So they are the procedures you're going to have to follow after categorizing the question. I hope I didn't go too fast on that one. So if you don't understand anything, please raise your hand or unmute to ask any question. Right, this one. Next up is this one. All right. Anne, can you do the 43rd question for me? And everybody else?
D.
All right, let's see. D. How about Lina and Hung? Have you come up with your own
Same answer.
answer? All right,
Yeah,
same
the
answer.
same.
How about Lina?
The same.
All right, let's see if we are all correct or all wrong. All right. While the organizations behind the project ultimately aim to open a permanent art space and gallery on the reservation to serve as a fixed cultural hub, the art in motion of rolling arts will continue. Let's see, 43rd. The art in motion of rolling arts will continue. I'm seeing run on, don't I? I'm seeing a run on because the before and after, they both have subject and verb, right? So the question should be A, but you all choose D. Why is that? Can you explain why is it D, An? Before and after, they both have subject and verbs. So D is a run on. Why did you choose D?
Run on. You said what was a run on? Like, what'd you say about run ons again?
Run on are sentences where it's separated two independent clauses, which are S plus V. They are SV clauses separated by comma without the use of fanboys.
Wait, so are run ons like separated by commas or the semicolon?
Yeah, when you can only make the run-on mistake when you use the comma. Right, this is a run-on. He is running. She is sleeping. It is a run-on because he is running is a verb. He is a subject. She is a verb. A subject. He is a verb. It is a verb. So there are two subject and verb clauses separated by a comma. So without a use of fanboys, so it is a run-on.
So
So-
you're not you don't use a comma on a run on?
Yeah, you can't use comma to separate two independent clauses. It would create a run-on. Run-on is a mistake, is an error.
Oh, because I heard earlier, I was confused with something because I thought because like when you said run on and then you put like the semicolon earlier, I like earlier before I was confused. So I think
Okay. So have you got the clear concept of run-on?
yeah. So they're separated by run ons like it's two independent clauses separated by a comma. And you
Yes,
can't do.
that's basically it. So there's a simpler question for you. Do you think it's a run-on? Do you have that definition in mind? Do you think it is a run-on?
Yeah.
Right. So you think it is a run-on because it is separated by two subjects and two verbs. There are two subjects and two verbs in this sentence, and it's separated by a comma. So the D would create a run-on. Let's see. The organization behind the project, AIM, the organization is a subject and AIM is a verb. The art in motion, the art is a subject and will continue is a verb. So it creates a run-on, right? But there's a catch. There's a reason why I asked you, why is it not, or is it a run-on? Because this is in fact not a run-on, but it is the structural context of while. When you use while, it is two clauses separated by a comma, yeah? While she is lazy, comma, she woke up early. You see this? This is a comma, and in which case it doesn't create a run-on because it is backed up by while. You see? But if there's no while, you're going to have to use the semicolon because it would indeed create a run-on. But in this case, you have while, and you remember while just like although, and despite, in spite of, things like that. And you can be separated, and this is the structure, and they can be separated by a comma. Why is it, you may ask? Why is, because I want you to understand it in a deeper level, because the ultimate rule of comma is to do not use to separate two independent clauses. But why is this that? Because although and while and despite of and everything, it doesn't belong there. The initial place of it is actually, for example, she, I'm going to invite you all, she is lazy. No, while is a bit difficult to explain here, but I'm going to use although. Okay, although it's interchangeable into, you see what I mean. She she woke up early, although she's lazy. See, this is essentially the same as while, but I haven't come up with an example yet, so I'm going to use although, right? Although it's just basically the same with while. You see, this is a comma, but this comma does not originate from the sentence itself. It originates from although. So this comma comes with although. So if you cross out although, the comma will be gone. So therefore, you can't use the comma in itself. But once you move although to the front, or you're going to move she woke up early to the back, you see, the structure stays the same. Basically, it stays the same. Although she's lazy, is lazy, something. She woke up early. You see, the comma itself, it doesn't move. Doesn't mean that it originated from itself because it stays there. You see, two clauses separated by although comma, it just switches its position and although moved to the beginning. That doesn't mean that the comma come from the sentence itself. It in fact is still a part of although. So it is from the although structure. It is not from the sentence itself. Therefore, there's no run-on. So as a rule, if you cross out although, you're going to have to cross out comma and going to have to replace it with punctuation like semicolon or a period. Have you got why this is not a run-on?
Yeah.
All right. How about Lina and Hung?
Got it.
All right. So this is basically it. And I have published this document on the Google Classroom, and there are a lot of different let me see, a lot of different tests. For example, March, April, May, August, October, December. You can just forego everything all. You can just do everything before being assigned to as homework. But I'm going to give out homework based on this table content, based on this document. And if you have finished doing this document or this PDF file, just ask me and I'll publish another one. But in for the next 1 or 2 weeks, we're going to have to finish on every single tests, not every questions, just some questions relating to the new SAT or the SAT that we're going to take later. But yeah, this is basically the PDF. There are also the answer in the back. Full disclosure, I published the answers for you at the back of the book, of the PDF file, but it depends on you whether to be honest or not, because I don't restrict you from looking at the back of the cover to see that there are answers. Full disclosure. So if you want to cheat, if you want to look at that, that's fine by you, but it's not fine by me. Because if you want to actually improve, you're going to have to do it first, and then you're going to look for the result and check back. And if you don't understand the question or the result, you're going to ask me. That's the reason of the answer being at the back of the book. That's why I don't delete them, because you can to be honest, you can totally self-study and you can ask me later, because that's what I encourage. Although you are learning in my class, but this is what I am different from others. I give you the full control of whether or not to study or whether or not to study beforehand. So that's your freedom, and it's your choice. And I'm going to give out homework later, but for the meantime, I think if you don't have any other questions, the class is finished. So any other questions? Are there any other questions? So, all right. If you don't have any other question, I'd say that I've done a great job in explaining it to you. And in which case, so the class is finished. Have a great day. Have a great night. And I'll see you again later. Bye, everyone.